Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to do a PCOS Q&A. Now I've got 15 questions that you guys sent in to me over on Instagram, but as I'm sitting here talking, I'm thinking, why did I not put up a question box like on YouTube somewhere as this is going up on YouTube? If there's any questions that don't get answered in this video, leave them down below and then maybe I'll do like a part 2 Q&A. That's if there's enough questions. If there's not enough questions, then maybe I'll just answer the odd ones down below. Before we do dive into the questions, if anyone is new and watching, hi, my name is Ebony, welcome to my channel, and I'm a naturopathic nutritionist, and I would say I specialise in women's health, but honestly, like, it goes off in many areas nowadays because if you know the body, it's incredibly connected. So I might start off working in one area, but I'll end up working in multiple different areas. So I'm pretty across the board in terms of the things that I support nowadays. I know some people will say once you've got PCOS, that's it, you can't reverse it. But in my practice, just going off my experience, I have seen many women actually come to me with PCOS, and then after working together, they no longer tick those boxes and that PCOS diagnosis actually gets revoked. I do think there is the opportunity to actually change PCOS. So whenever I have someone come to a PCOS, I always do try and say to them, please don't get too attached to the diagnosis of PCOS, because PCOS is essentially, it's just a collection of symptoms, okay? So it's not like just like one condition, it's basically the name which umbrellas a collection of things that are going on. So I think a really good starting point, just before we dive into the questions, is to talk about like what is the criteria you meet in order to be diagnosed with PCOS. So there is something called the Rotterdam criteria, which we go by, and basically you have to tick 2 out of the 3 boxes. And those boxes are, number 1 is polycystic ovaries, so that you get diagnosed through an ultrasound. Number 2 would be hyperandrogenism, so high androgens, high like male sex hormones. And number 3 would be issues around issues around ovulation. So whether that's anovulation, so that's a lack of, so no ovulation, or oligo-ovulation, which is irregular ovulation. Okay, so they are the 3 pillars, and you just need to tick 2 out of those 3 to essentially be granted that diagnosis of PCOS. And I think also one thing to point out there is that actually you don't have to have polycystic ovaries to have PCOS, because that's also sometimes a common misconception, is people think because it's called polycystic ovarian syndrome, you have to have polycystic ovaries, but actually that's not the case. So let's dive into these questions then. And the first one is, what are the main symptoms to look out for with PCOS? So really, it's just symptoms that come alongside those 3 things I just discussed. So for example, with high androgen, so high male sex hormones, you might see things like acne, you might see things like oily skin, darkened hair growth is very common, or excessive like new hair growth. So there's something called hirsutism, which is very common with PCOS. So you might see darkening of hair, for example, around like the chins or on facial areas. They call it like male pattern hair growth. Maybe like underneath the navel might go darker, hair on the chest area here might go a bit darker, around the nipples can also be another one. Speaking of hair, it can also be hair loss as well, that can also be a symptom. Now also looking at things like with the anovulation or irregular ovulation, you might see irregular periods, maybe you're missing your period completely altogether. There could be maybe fertility troubles going on there. Sometimes women with PCOS can also struggle with their weight, and particularly if they are struggling with insulin resistance. That's very common with PCOS as well. So yeah, definitely weight concerns. So when I say weight concerns, I mean like gaining weight or struggling to lose it, essentially. It's not a one thing fits all. I think that's also the misconception, is that sometimes we're told, yeah, if you have PCOS, you're going to struggle with your weight. Absolutely not. Like, some women actually have no issues with their weight at all. In fact, actually are more on the petite side and struggle to gain weight and still fit the criteria of PCOS. It's not a one thing fits all there. I would say they're some of the top symptoms, but what's so confusing with PCOS is that the symptoms are just very similar just to general hormonal imbalances in women. So that's why there is a lot of confusion around, do I have PCOS or do I not? Because yeah, things do cross over quite a bit there. Question number 2 I have here is gluten and dairy restrictions for life? In my opinion, no. Food is not actually the issue. The issue is how the body is interacting and responding to the food. So to give an example, PCOS is also considered an inflammatory condition. So if there is a lot of inflammation being provoked in someone's body, then yes, restricting things like gluten, for example, might really help because it will help drain down the inflammatory load. It also depends what is going on in other areas, you know, of someone's health. Like for example, say someone's got some gut things going on, then inflammation might be being provoked from their gut, which is then also aggravating to the overall inflammatory bucket for the body, which is then aggravating their PCOS. So take gluten as the example. If let's say their intestinal barrier is weak, for example, then yeah, taking the gluten out is really helpful because that will just continue to be wearing down their barrier and causing more inflammation, which in turn could aggravate their PCOS. I hope that makes sense. What I'm just trying to say is that when it comes to PCOS, you've got to think about inflammation as a whole in the body. And going back to the foods, like yes, taking gluten and dairy out temporarily might help because it will drain down a bit of inflammation. But really what you want to be focusing on is getting to the root of where that inflammation is coming from and fix that, because once that's fixed, you should be able to incorporate things like gluten and dairy back into your diet and eat them, you know, without the consequences essentially of flaring up your PCOS. So in my personal opinion, I do not think that gluten and dairy restrictions need to be for life. Yes, maybe you might not get back to a place where like you're eating them every day, 3 meals a day, but I feel like you could get them back into your diet and have them in balance, and you just have that healthy balance and control, but you're not restricted from them. Okay, question number 3 is post-pill PCOS explained. I love this question because this is honestly something as a practitioner that really frustrates me so much, because in my opinion, again, I feel like PCOS is so like overly misdiagnosed with people who just come off the pill. When you come off the pill, the things that you're facing are basically the boxes that tick the boxes for PCOS. For example, when you come off the pill, very, very natural to have a surge in testosterone, because when you've been on the pill, that testosterone would have been really kind of flatlined essentially and reduced. So when you come off the pill, it's natural to have a little surge up of those male sex hormones. So very common to see a little moment of high testosterone post-pill. Second thing with the pill is that when you come off, it's going to take some time for your natural hormones to kick back in to get your ovulation and cycle going, okay? When you're on the pill, you're taking synthetic hormones, so you are shutting off your natural sex hormone production, right? So when you come off, one, your body's got to detox those synthetic hormones out, but it's also got to then suddenly be like, oh, hang on a second, we're doing this on our own again. So it's got to get your natural hormones back into gear. And the full cycle, okay, of your like ovulation, like an egg, all the way up until the day it ovulates, is 90 days. So that can take some women at least 3 months to even get that first period back post-pill. So after the pill, it's very common to see cycle issues. Also mentioning the fact that the pill depletes a lot of the nutrients that we need and rely on to get our cycle back and going when we come off. So you come off the pill actually very depleted in the things basically that you need to get that ovulation going. So when people come off the pill, if they haven't got the right support in place, many women can struggle to get that natural ovulation going. So there we go. All of a sudden, post-pill, many women are ticking that box with either anovulation, or which is the no ovulation, or having irregular ovulation, oligo-ovulation, right? And they're having irregular periods. So yes, very common post-pill, but it doesn't necessarily mean actually you have PCOS. That actually could just be the effect of you trying to rebalance things after coming off the pill. So just kind of tying this together is, and going back to kind of the criteria, yes, you may not have polycystic ovaries, but when you come off the pill, in the months coming after, you might tick the boxes of having high testosterone and issues around ovulation if those things aren't supported correctly. So there we go. Easily a doctor can be like, you've got PCOS. Post-pill PCOS is a really good example of the type of PCOS that I do see many women reverse, because of the fact it is very commonly misdiagnosed as PCOS, when in fact it was just their body struggling to regulate again after coming off the pill, and they just needed to get the right support in place. I believe I did do a video about supporting your body coming off the pill, so I'll leave that video down below, because if you're watching this and you feel like you have post-pill PCOS, then that video might be really helpful for you to also go and watch. Okay, number 4 is test results always say okay, but symptoms point to PCOS. Honestly, to put this really simply, it's just the fact that symptoms can have multiple root causes, honestly. I know that's a frustrating answer to hear. I would definitely, this is why I really would urge, like if you are on a journey and you've been told, no, it's not PCOS and you just cannot get to the bottom of it, then definitely is where I say go work with a practitioner, get some help and get someone to help you do that navigation work for you and put the puzzle pieces together. Because some of these symptoms like acne, for example, my gosh, I mean, I work with acne a lot. So many different root causes. Like it could come from the gut from some people, it could come from poor drainage pathways in someone. There's so many different possibilities that could cause someone to have acne. Same with things like hair loss, multiple reasons, high androgens can have multiple reasons. So yeah, I would definitely just say go see a practitioner who can help you do that navigation work, and maybe you need more testing as well. That could be really helpful, which actually brings me on to my next question actually, which is thoughts on hormone testing kits like Fertility. Are they more in depth than the doctors? Okay, I haven't experienced Fertility so much. I had one client or two who did it, and in my opinion, I think the best hormone test personally is the Dutch test. If you are really struggling with your hormones, I highly recommend that you look into a Dutch test. You could do like the Dutch Complete is a really good one to get like a starting point. And what's so great about that test is that this is the difference between this test and the doctor's test. The doctor's test will just tell you like the serum level, like just how much essentially is in the body. The Dutch test is going to actually show you the pathways, and that's like gold, okay? Like it's going to show you, like for example with testosterone, it will look at the testosterone pathway, it will look at the adrenals. Are you overproducing testosterone from the adrenals as well as the ovaries? Like it will look at the full picture. It will look at your estrogen, how are you metabolizing it through your liver? It's so much more in depth, and I think if you're really struggling with hormonal issues, that absolutely is worth testing. So if you are wanting to just get that little bit of extra insight into your hormones, I recommend the Dutch test personally. And if we're comparing it to other hormone tests on the market like Fertility, for me personally, the Dutch test takes the first prize because it looks into the pathways in a bit more detail, which I don't think you get with those other tests. Okay, next question is hair growth only, in brackets, hair laser removal doesn't work, I was about to say close bracket, high testosterone tips. So my first piece of advice with this is, if that's your only symptom, is I firstly would get really clear on where is the testosterone coming from and what kind of testosterone as well. What I mean by that, and again, this is something that you can find out through a Dutch test. So testosterone can be produced from the ovaries, but it can also be produced from the adrenals as well. So really getting a good view on like where's the issue coming from, okay? If it is through the ovaries as well, like is there an issue, I don't know, in the pathway there, for example? Are you over converting maybe your testosterone in the more potent form of testosterone called dihydrotestosterone, okay? So dihydrotestosterone is 4 times more potent than testosterone. So that's another thing you want to look at. Are you over converting maybe into that DHT? That would be my first piece of advice. Get very, very clear on where that testosterone is actually being provoked from. Because once you understand that, then you can have the right testosterone tips. For example, maybe you need certain herbs that are going to help reduce the conversion over into DHT. Maybe you need certain cofactors to support your testosterone metabolism. Maybe you're lacking in things like zinc, for example. Maybe there is issues in the adrenals. Maybe stress pathways need to be managed. Maybe the adrenals just need more cofactors and support. So when it comes to the high testosterone tips, it's very specific depending on where that testosterone issue is being rooted from. And of course, from a dietary perspective, balance those blood sugars. That's just crazy important for PCOS in general, because blood sugar management, in my opinion, is like one of the top things I make sure people are nailing if I'm working with them with PCOS, because that's going to affect the ovarian function. If you have got insulin resistance, that's very important to do, obviously, but also it's very important for testosterone. So an absolute must for PCOS girlies. So yeah, so balance the blood sugars, very important for that. Get ovulation going as well, because yeah, the ovulation aspect is going to have an impact on testosterone production. What other things from the dietary perspective is, of course just reduce those things that would aggravate testosterone, like processed foods and overconsumption of sugars. And also just to say on the sugar topic, it doesn't mean you have to like avoid sugar like the plague, full stop. Because I also see that like people with PCOS think, oh my God, I just cannot touch any sugar, even fruit, I can't have it. No, it's all about balance the blood sugars, honestly. Like, again, the food isn't necessarily the problem, it's how the body's interacting with it. So really focus on balancing the blood sugars, and then through smart choices, you should be able to have like a little bit of a sugar, you know, in your diet here and there. Like, I'm really against restriction. When I'm working with clients, I really want to make sure that we're not creating like a restrictive diet, because that can then also add issues in other areas. Like that can be really stressful, for example. Next one is adrenal PCOS explained. Basically, adrenal PCOS is where you are overproducing testosterone through, so there's something called DHEA, okay, that gets produced through the adrenals. And adrenal PCOS is basically diagnosed where you aren't overproducing testosterone from the ovaries, so that's not the problem. It is just coming from the adrenals, okay? So this is solely just an adrenal issue, okay? That's what adrenal PCOS is. I will just say now, I've actually put this next to me because I really wanted to mention this book in this video. If you haven't come across this book yet, I'm a really big fan of Lara Bridden. I think she's a really great practitioner in this space, and her books are fantastic. Really well written, really easy to read the information, and it just gives you a really nice foundational support and understanding really of your hormones, but particularly PCOS in this book. So this is the Period Repair Manual by Dr. Lara Bridden, and in fact when I'm working with clients and we're like putting their plans together, you know, many times that they have PCOS, I'll mention this book and I'll say like read it alongside, because I just think the more you understand how the body works, the more you understand, you know, what you're doing and like why you're doing something. And yeah, it's really key, I think. So really do recommend checking out this book, because some of these questions like, you know, adrenal PCOS explained, post-pill PCOS explained, yeah, there's a couple of those things. Or PCOS types is another question here. She goes over all of that in this book. So yeah, really great read. I know if you're dealing with PCOS, you'll love it. Okay, next question. Can PCOS go away with the right diet and lifestyle changes? In my opinion, because again, no, this is a bit of like a topic where some people are on the stance of like, once you got it, you can't get rid of it. In my opinion, I have seen people reverse it. Like, I have fully seen people come with the blood work where it's been diagnosed, we've worked on their diet, lifestyle, obviously supplements also come into that as well, and really, you know, rework their system, and then they've done their blood work, done their testing, and they no longer tick those boxes and aren't categorized as PCOS. So I have seen that. So in my opinion, I believe some cases can be reversed. That being said, some cases maybe not so much, maybe a bit more of a struggle, but I do think there is so much you can do with PCOS, and it's just about getting to those roots and really like figuring out where it's driving from, and then yeah, putting that right support in place that's bespoke to what you need. So I do think if you work with someone and get the right guidance, I think there's a lot you can do with PCOS. And actually, I'm going to follow up with this question after that. There's another question here that says getting pregnant. It says here getting pregnant with irregular cycles, how to approach. But just to say, getting pregnant with PCOS, one of the first things I say to my clients who come to me with PCOS diagnosed, particularly if they're young and maybe they're not even thinking about kids yet, I say to them, please just ignore that comment of you're going to really struggle to have kids, because absolutely, some women with PCOS absolutely might struggle, okay? Because, you know, there is functional things going on here that of course can affect fertility. Of course, that's a reality. But I also think there is a huge group of women who get diagnosed with PCOS, but by being told you're going to struggle, like whether they got told that in their early 20s, they're going to remember that when they eventually want to start getting pregnant. And I do believe that really just doesn't help. It really adds more fuel to the fire. And just to say now, I have had many women who I've worked with PCOS who have successfully fallen pregnant naturally. So I always say to my clients, please ignore it. Let's just work on the factual you know, things that we know about PCOS, is really work on the foundations, rebuild your body up, work on these pathways, and let's see, do you know what I mean, what happens, and keep that still as a possibility and don't just shut it off. So yeah, I personally am really on the fan club of like, yes, you can get pregnant with PCOS and it can happen. Now, looking at this question with the getting pregnant with irregular cycles and how to approach, me personally, if I'm working with a client with PCOS and they have irregular cycles or just trying to get pregnant, I put so much attention and focus just all into that ovulation, because that's the thing we need to make sure is working and healthy, and you're having successful ovulation, because without the ovulation you can't get pregnant, right? So that's what I put a lot of focus into. And we also really want to make sure that they are producing enough progesterone to sustain not only a healthy luteal phase, because you really got to make sure you've got a good luteal phase length, you know, to support fertility and successful pregnancy, but also if they are successful and that egg and sperm come together and it does implant into a uterus, we want to make sure there's enough progesterone to maintain and hold the pregnancy. So I really focus a lot in that area. Of course, we look at all the other areas and just the person as a whole, but that would be where I'd be putting a lot of my focus, is really making sure we're getting that ovulation going. Also really helpful to actually track the basal temperature, particularly when someone's got irregular cycles, because if you don't know about this, tracking your temperature, so your basal temperature, as soon as you wake up in the morning, when you ovulate you get a rise in temperature and it stays up. So doing that, we can really track when the woman has ovulated, and we can see like what day, and we can also track how long that luteal phase is to make sure that we're getting that to the length we want it to be. Okay, next question is how to know if you have enough progesterone. Firstly, it'd be look out for the signs of low progesterone. So those signs would definitely be things like spotting before your period, so having like that discharge and spotting just before like your full flow starts. That can be a sign of low progesterone. Another sign could be if you're having a short luteal phase, so the time between your ovulation and your next period. If that is below, I would say if it's below 10, then we're thinking about progesterone being low. Ideally, you want to get that to at least like around 12. If you are seeing that phase is shortened, that can be a sign of low progesterone. Also, of course, cycle irregularities can also be a sign of low progesterone, purely because if there's issues around ovulation. If there's issues around ovulation, you're not going to be producing progesterone. Like you need to produce, you need to ovulate, sorry, to produce progesterone. So that's also another thing to look out for. Other symptoms could be like prolonged or like really heavy bleeding. That can sometimes be a sign of low progesterone. I'll put a list on the screen right now that you can see. And I would also say, if you're really interested to find out what your progesterone levels are like, test it. You can definitely get this done with your GP. You've got to make sure that you have it tested after ovulation. So they'll tell you have it on day 21 of your cycle, but you just need to make sure that you know that you have that test in your luteal phase, so after you've ovulated, right? There's no point having it before you ovulate. So that's another thing, is go to your GP and see if they can actually test your progesterone, you know, in your luteal phase, and see actually how much you are producing. Okay, next question, best approach to weight loss with PCOS. Oh, okay, lots of things here to discuss. I actually have a whole video I filmed on weight loss actually, and I don't know whether it's up before this one, but it's definitely filmed and on its way if it's not up already. Number one will be lift those damn weights, okay? You'll hear me talk about this a lot in that weight loss video I filmed, but my gosh, absolutely with PCOS, you wanna lift weights. If you are spending your days doing the cardio and the HIIT and all of this stuff and you've got PCOS, you're on the wrong tracks. You're on the wrong tracks, okay? Weight resistance and strength training is absolutely number one for you, because again, I speak all about this in this video. So that video, if it's up or coming, is going to be a great one for you to watch if this question is one that you're interested in. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, okay? And one thing to also know, particularly because this is important with PCOS, with insulin resistance, the more you build your muscle, it's actually going to increase your insulin sensitivity, okay? So it's very, very, very important to support your metabolism in your body. So if you are struggling with weight, like weight loss, and you're trying to like lose weight essentially, and you've got PCOS, absolutely get some strength training into your routine. The second thing I'd also say, just from the movement perspective, is you can inject, like, I know some people want to do like their HIIT workouts and they want to do a little bit of that, but what I typically find with like my PCOS girls that I work with is that particularly if their adrenals are a little bit more on the weaker side as well, and there's like some of their PCOS elements are coming from their adrenals, gosh, the HIIT workouts and the stressful workout environments are just not helping either, because it's a bit like whipping like a tired horse, right? So I sometimes find that does add a bit more fuel to their fire, and they just don't see results as well with that. I think another really important thing to add to this as well, just to explain this a bit further of why I'm saying I just don't think it's best suited, is that with PCOS as well, you really want to work on your nervous system. I haven't actually spoken about this yet. You really want to work on your nervous system and really work on keeping stress down and, you know, good stress management practices, and, you know, really nurture and look after your stress axis, and, you know, work on getting yourself in that parasympathetic state, because if you're in like a sympathetic fight or flight mode all the time, not going to be best matched with PCOS. Because again, going back to like ovulation issues, if you're struggling with ovulation and you're struggling to produce things like progesterone, stress is not going to be your friend. I mean, it's never anyone's friend, but particularly in this instance, it's not going to be your friend. So yeah, if you're doing lots of like stress inducing exercise, that's obviously like all types of exercise is stress inducing, but you know what I mean, like the real like spins and the intensity and like people start screaming at you and you're just like, your adrenals like, give me a break. If you're in that situation, it's not going to be helping in terms of like nurturing your ovaries and getting your ovulation going and sending all the right signals to your body to help rewire and balance those hormones back out. So yeah, strength and weights, like lifting weights for the win, work on building muscle. That's something that I definitely need to, I'm working on, because I know, like, you know, looking at me, you're like, hun, you're like a weed. Literally, I know. I've got way more muscle on my legs. My legs are way more muscly in my upper body. I am really working on that myself. I mean, I don't have PCOS, but just for general health, look at me, I'm going off on a tangent. I've done a whole video on this. Wait to that video. But yes, I'm trying to build muscle as well, because it's so good for us, so good for our metabolism. Other things as well with the weight loss with PCOS, going back to the whole blood sugar picture, absolutely want to make sure that there is not insulin resistance at play. We want to make sure that we're really nurturing the blood sugars, because if they are imbalanced, like this is a really common reason why people have weight issues with PCOS. If you have got insulin resistance, you're just going to keep on storing more fat. Typically as well, that fat will go to the middle area around the stomach. So if that is you and you're like, yes, that's where my fat goes, think about the whole picture with insulin and working on your blood sugars and improving insulin sensitivity. I am gonna end that question there, because honestly, that video I filmed, I know that is packed with all the answers and information to answer this question. Okay, so they are the questions that I have for this PCOS Q&A. I'm more than happy to do a part 2, so if there's any more PCOS questions you have, please leave them down below, and if there's enough questions, I will pull them together and do another Q&A. If you haven't already and you don't want to miss any future videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up to let me know if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!